This is Jonathan Anomthara, and we're talking about chain of being. So, entering figure one, let's talk about the traditional chain of being. Now, these chains of being are what link a human being with his universe, a human being with the universe outside of him, the universe inside of him. It also links him to the people around him, to nature, to technology, to concepts, to psychology, to everything. So, starting with figure one, let's talk about the physical and the spiritual. So, in figure one, we have a traditional great chain of being. Let's imagine you at the very center of all these circles. The A, the one, the matter, and the physics all in one circle united, up, down, left, right. That is basically to be understood as your reality when it begins. As a baby and as a toddler, you are basically, your entire world is up, down, left, right, and eventually concepts of one, of me, of I, of self, of the most basic desires like want and feed and hungry and cold and hot. Immediately outside of that circle, you you see other greater concepts start to form in the cosmos around us. You have biology and life. You have two, or A plus B. You can imagine that this means, there's pairings of things. There's the introduction of and concept of two people, of us, of we, of togetherness. And you have life and biology itself start coming into the cosmos as a thing that somebody is both noticing as a concept but beginning to interact with as a manipulative a concept that they may manipulate themselves. Outside of that next great chain is the third circle, A plus B plus C, or the number three. It is also life, or it is also psychology, and it is also mind. Moving outside of that circle, you have the number four, you have A plus B plus C plus D. You have theology starts coming into play and the concepts of the soul. You see how these layers are starting to move into each other, into concepts of the bodies and concepts of the worlds, and that you've heard from other theologies and pop culture, even. And the next circle outside of that is the number five, or A plus B plus C plus D plus E, compounding components. You have concepts of mysticism and concepts of spirit. And something to remember is if at the bottom right and on the outermost you have spirit, that means that the top left or at the very most center you would have the body, spirit and body. And through these circles, you can understand how the world and its concepts, the cosmos and its concepts, are plotted in a way that makes sense to everyone. That makes sense. You could take this and you could draw it out to any primitive culture, any advanced culture around the world, and just in this description with this image, they would all understand, and they might even draw other symbols. If you do that trick while you're looking at this image of figure one, and you do that one trick where you kind of cross your eyes and you make, those types of art where if you cross your eyes you see a different image come out of the background. You kind of do that with this, and you see it's a cross with a circle, which is all over the world. That symbol is all over the world. Now, this could have been, assembled that way because of convenience. It could have been assembled that way because the human mind specifically likes to group imagery in specific patterns. Or it could be because this concept is a holographic concept that exists across all spiritualities, all psychologies, all civilizations, and all disciplines. Now, moving on from this figure, we're moving on to figure two, and the concept is going to become more complex. Moving into figure two, you have the great chain in various wisdom traditions. So, let's start with Judaism. It's one that we're all familiar with in the West. Starting at the center, you have the human being, and moving outward in the first circle is the material. From the center, middle, moving right, we have the world of action. In Judaism, this first sphere is the world of action. Moving over to the right to Christianity, let's turn the dial of our frequency a little bit, or turn the dial of the channels, the volumes, however you want to see that. Imagine that as like a deal or a turner of some kind, and you're turning the dial to the right. You see we're on Christianity, and in the first sphere, Christianity acknowledges that as nature itself and how nature works in the cosmos and the purity and the divinity within nature, the natural world. We're talking about the Garden of Eden and the purity of the world around humanity as humanity is meant to maintain that beauty and that purity. And Christianity has its own commandments that are involved with that as well, and so does Judaism. Turn the dial again a little bit to the right, you have Islam. And in Islam, they have the concept of the mulk, or the kingdom, which is their first sphere, the idea that what is on this ground realm, the humanity must manage the kingdom just the same way that Christianity must manage the natural world. They are managing that physical kingdom of God on earth. We switch it again and we move into Hinduism. And in Hinduism, we see that this is the level of the gross body. The gross body is, if you think you slap your hands together as a clap, that feeling and that sound all together is, I clapped, kaboom, there it was, and everyone around you recognizes you. That guy is clapping. That is the gross body in action. The world of action, gross body, the world of you have to do something physically for something to happen. You look around you, birds have to be constantly flapping in order to move. Sharks have to constantly swim in order to breathe. This is even down to the most basic level of germs and cell structures. It is a world of action. Switch it again to the Buddhist visual, to the Buddhist principles, and you have the five Vijnananas, or the world of the five senses, in which case you just taste, sight, smell, hearing, and touch all together. You have your senses there. And that is what makes up your concept of reality. If I can touch it, if I can taste it, if I can smell it, I can see it, and if I can hear it, all of those come together as this thing is real, and it's irrefutably real. And therefore it gains its own name. We switch again a little bit further and we go into the Chinese concept of Shen. This world is the body, the Shen, the physical body of the cosmos. Now here's where things get a little bit interesting. So far we have been moving through this whole concept on the right wheel. You can also apply this to the brain in a very interesting way of right side, left side, forward side, back side. And here, because this great chain is divided in four ways here, as well as in all of its pie chart, you have the concept of Allah dividing us top to bottom on the right side, and then the concept of Maya on the left side. But what divides us down the middle is ideas of the material and the intermediate and the celestial and the infinite, all the way down to the body, the mind, the soul, and the spirit. Very interesting. These concepts are not meant to clash with each other. Instead, they hold each other arm in arm. They interweave with each other like a sewn pattern and create this great chain of being where all of humanity, whether in multiple states, in multiple parts of your life, or as you move throughout the world and in stages of your life, you start to move through these different senses and these different realities. Now, continuing our wheel circle around, we move into concept of the Jew and what the Jew believes. And as far as that first layer going down, going up, they have a system called the Sephiroth. And because of the Sephiroth, they're able to achieve a union and an interaction with that system in the world of the body. Christianity has prayer and revelation as its concept of how to affect the body of this reality. And the Muslims, their concept of how to do that is with the jinn, or the jinn force, which is when they pray and they do their rituals, it affects the spiritual jinns, the spirits, the angels, the jinn of their cosmology to then begin taking action on the background mechanisms of the cosmos to ensure that God's will is made manifest, while the human will, as long as the human will aligns to that God's will, in which case it is then made to manifest in the way that it does. And that is why the Muslims will say things that, whether it's tragedy or triumph, God wills it, because they're not attributing the idea that, oh well, if you got screwed over, that was God's will, or if you got blessed, it was directly God's will. It's more like, if your intention was aligned to God's will, then of course that happened. Even if you died, even if some tragedy happened, if it's God's will, then it's because everything aligned to make that happen, in which case this was still a good thing. This tragedy was still somehow a good thing because it was supposed to be that way. And anything that was meant to be was clearly meant to be to serve a greater purpose in balancing the cosmos for the sake of light. Therefore, God is good. And when God wills it, then what is willed is good because God is good. We turn the dial again. We move up into the Maya's concepts on reality as opposed to selfhood. And their first world concept of that is called the Prakriti. We move over, which is the concept of how the energy, again, the way the Muslims think about how there's a background mechanism that's being worked on by these beings. The Prakriti is the same concept, as there's background energy in the cosmos that's moving at certain frequencies, and when we align those frequencies, then divine things happen. Moving into Buddhism, we have the Nirmanakaya, which, again, very much the same concept. The spiritual and the material, or I should say the energetic and the material, are beginning to become one concept, one reality, where through selfhood you have this concept of, through my own actions I can achieve these greater outcomes in the cosmos. But then through the levels of reality, you can see how, because of these great machinations and these great mechanisms in the cosmos, I am able to then perceive and act through myself. We've talked before about, does the butterfly's wing beat start the hurricane on the other side of the world, or does the hurricane on the other side of the world move the wing beat of the butterfly? That's what we're talking about when it's the level of selfhood. The butterfly beats his wing and causes the hurricane, or the level of reality, which is the hurricane may cause the wind to beat the wings of the butterfly. Now back up to the Chinese religious complex is, in this first world, the material world. It is the world of 10,000 things, and let's boil that down to, in the course of one human lifetime, there can only really be 10,000 moments, 10,000 things that you touched, 10,000 people that you saw, 10,000 individual accomplishments that you accomplished. It's only ever 10,000 things. You could only ever meet 10,000 people. Hopefully you've only reincarnated maybe 10,000 times before achieving some kind of nirvana. The world of 10,000 things. Now, the great chain goes outward into, as I stated before, 4 different rings. So in Judaism, let's just roll them out now by religion here. In Judaism, you have world of action, as we stated before, but then world of formation, world of creation, and world of emanation. World of action, I do and things occur. World of formation, I imagine this thing and then it can be brought into the world of action. Then there's the world of creation, which is even higher up than that, is the great beings above me have interacted with my dreams, and which is the higher version of me, to create an outcome downward into the world of formation and then into the world of action. And then above all of that is the world of emanation, which is the great divine godlike source beings that created all of and the entire cosmos, which were above those beings that even manage that cosmos. Those beings up there are sending downward a specific thing, a specific frequency of energy, a specific message, or a specific mission, straight down all the layers of the world of creation, the world of formation, the world of action. And and on its way down like a ladder, it just, every rung, it assumes the form it needs to and evolves all the way down, so that it's creating an active effect in every world on its way down all the way to the bottom world, so that the entirety of creation, all of the cosmos, all dimensions of that cosmos are all altered by the course of that action. It's very top down. But the concept in Judaism, which involves their symbol, the triangle pointed up, overlaid by the triangle pointed down, is the idea that this, when it goes down, it must go back up, and what goes up must come back down, not in terms of gravity, but in terms of correspondence. Because I prayed to God, God must respond with a blessing. And if God blesses me, then I must respond with a prayer of gratitude. Now, moving on to Christianity, which this is very apparent in Christianity, where you have the world of nature, the world of angel of demons, the world of God, the cataphatic, and then you have the world of the Godhead, or the apophatic. So the world of nature, as we described, is the world as you see it. The angels and the world of the angels and demons is there are things up there and things above and below us who are influencing and can be influenced by what's happening in this world and by us, the beings that live in this world. The layer of God, the cataphatic is the layer in which gods and angels interact to have the outcomes out here. And so I believe there is one story from the Bible where an angel is speaking to the individual, and then he basically glances up and then speaks to God, who then speaks down to the angel, who then clarifies an instruction to the individual. And it's like, oh, so this correspondence can happen in reality on a cataphatic level. Now you go one level above that, which is the apophatic level, Godhead. That is God. That is, again, the very far up further source. So Heavenly Father, if it's Christianity, the God above Jesus and above all of the other ones, the absolute creator God of them all, that God, big white beard on a cloud God on a throne, where he created, oversees the creation, but not in terms of directly intervenes, like I'm middle management. No, that's where Jesus and the other beings are. This is Heavenly Father above and completely, like, I have now set the planet in motion. I'm now watching it play out completely. Can still be accessed, can still be talked to, can still send a direct update to the plan down. But as I'm saying, he's not actively every second of every moment, twisting knobs and pushing buttons. Moving over to Islam, Mulk, kingdom. Next is Malakut, which is the dominion. And then you have the Jabarut, the domination. And finally, the Hawiya Galb, the unmanifested, or the Iza, the sovereign power. Now, theirs is a little bit more abstract than the Christians one, and it's because it's more related to the way the Judaic system is when you get into the Kabbalah. So you have an our kingdom, which is the very end point at the bottom where all of the light descends down. The next one above that is less real, less physical, and more energy, and that's why it's the dominion of the elements and the clouds and the angels in Islam. Above that, and the same thing, they form a lot more of the background mechanisms. However, they're less to be acted upon and more of just to follow. That's why it's a dominion, not a kingdom. And then Jabarut, which is the realm of domination, where it's what is said is done. No ifs, ands, or buts. There's no discussion. That is the layer in which, when God says when God gives a command, the command is carried out without hesitation, without discussion, without differentiation or delineation. That is what it is. And if you were to imagine machinations, like as in a machine, where certain parts of the machine can only do specific actions when certain circumstances arise, that's very much what the realm of domination is. Where if the sun rises, the world has to heat up. It's like that. And therefore, for the world to heat up, the sun must rise. Therefore, the sun must always rise. Above that is the unmanifested sovereign power, which, yes, there is a creator sovereign being above all of that, but you're not, no being below his level is technically allowed to perceive and know him, because then that would be contrary to the whole point of reality. This is a very top-down system where, because I am looking down upon you, you cannot look up upon me, because you too are looking down upon the next layer beneath you. Humans look down at their feet because that's what they're walking on. Therefore, you wouldn't look up to walk because you'd trip and fall. You'd look down to walk. If we were a flying creature, we would be concerned with what's above in the sky, but we're not. We're a ground creature, so we need to be concerned with what's on the ground. So when you go up, this is a very interesting concept, because without the science of knowing that above the blue sky there is black space, Islam and Judaism do have already have the concept that above the skyline where you see the birds fly, there is black space where the stars are, and that is where God is. And so, where in Judaism and in Kabbalah you have this idea of the Ein being so far up there, the Ayin being so far up there that it is just the black no energy, and from that emerges the Okidanok, which is the seven rays of light. Instead, with Islam, it's that from that dark space above, the darkness is matter, is light. It is just in its most pure form, the way that after you burn things down into coals become black, and it is a pure form of just potential energy. And that is what is above that, that unmanifested, meaning it hasn't taken a physical form as you, me, or an angel would, but it is still the sovereign power of the cosmos, the way that a bearded man on a throne would be. And so you can consider that more of an abstract concept as opposed to a physical, direct, easy to grab on concept. But it doesn't mean that Islam is harder to understand. It is, you can see the layout: kingdom, dominion, domination, sovereign power, unmanifested sovereign power. It's very well easy to understand and lay that out. And then once you see how they begin to work this into day-to-day life, it's just like in these other religions. It's very easy to understand, and that's why you see Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They have a lot of concepts that are related to each other. There's a lot of where there's friction now. It should have been a nice bonding spot for them to learn about each other and to see what they had in common instead of what they had different. But most of these cultures have had their friction points. So we go down to Hinduism. We have the gross body, the subtle body, the causal body, and the Atman, the spiritual body. Gross body is, like we said, you have to do things with it. The subtle body is you have to think things. The causal body, you have to feel things. And then in the Turiya, the Atman, the highest form of body, that is where what you are when everything else is pulled away, that complete original shard of divine soul, that is what rules above that, above in the Atman realm. That divine being is you, but again, we're working in concept inversion here, where instead of you looking up and, oh yeah, God is above me, it's that you're looking up and seeing only yourself up there, looking back down at you, saying, oh, I am God, and this human body is below me. Instead of that is God and he is above me. And so in the West, people tend to misconstrue this concept as, oh, that means that I'm the God of my cosmos and you're all the angels and the lower beings and you all need to serve me. And therefore, as the God concept starts to take over and these people become crazy and dangerous, as opposed to this true version of the true concept, which is, no, there is a divine form, a divine emanation of you up there, and it is the true version of you. But the you that is down here needs to get to that. You need to work up the gross and subtle and cosmal bodies to be able to contact with the Atman to uh, such a degree that you make that contact permanent instead of um, once in a while, which is where we're all at right now. Is where maybe 10 years ago, I would have had a once in every 10 years contact with divinity through training and through study and through meaningful, active practice. I have been able to refine that into a once a week. When I really get into all of my practices, I can really get into the right space to tap into divinity and share that space with true divinity. That is Atman, being able to really resonate and tap into and stay linked to the Atman level. But you need all the other levels below it in sync too. Next is Buddhism, which we started with the five senses, the five Vijnanas. Next you have the gross mind, which is the Mano Vijnana, the subtle mind, the Alaya Vijnana, and the Buddha or the nature mind. And you see how, oh, they have a gross and a subtle mind too, but theirs is inverted from the Hindu. And when you study it, Hindu and Buddhism, people say that Buddhism branched out from Hinduism because Buddha Shakyamuni was not a fan of the sheer amount of rituals required for Hinduism. That on the outside, the physical rituals that he believed should have been going on the inside all the time, instead of on the outside, bound to these dates and these calendars and just be a slave to ritual calendars. Should have been on the inside, and that's why he came up with the idea of pilgrimages instead. Was the pilgrimage gave you the opportunity to truly create the circumstances of the ritual inside you as well as outside you, to include the world outside of you as a part of the ritual instead of trying to delineate and set and segregate it from each other. Buddhism is wonderful for that. It's the walking man's Hinduism. Next, we have Chinese, which you have the Shen, the Xin, the Ling, and the Shen, which is body, mind, soul, and then body again. But after you have unified your body, your mind, and your soul, it's at that point that the Chinese say you have achieved spirit or you have achieved divinity. And that's why it's Shen again, but it is a different kind of Shen. It is the purified, magnified, enlightened Shen, or the enlightened body, a body which is made light, made lighter, or more as light. There's many ways to describe. That's why I love the English version of languages. The English, like Hebrew and several of these other languages, there are several interpretations you can always pull out of things, and whether they're correct or incorrect, sometimes the more esoteric interpretation can actually hold a lot more philosophical meaning to it. And so that is figure 2 of the chains the great chain in various wisdom traditions. Moving over into from down from the levels of selfhood and then left over and then up again to levels of reality. Again, you see the Sephiroth, you see spirit, soul, psyche, body, and Christianity. Those are our primary concerns when we're talking about this in a reality sense of, okay, what's the reality of Christianity? Well, we're concerned with the body, the psyche, the soul, and the spirit. Okay, cool. And in that case, the soul is inside you and the spirit is outside of you. And the spirit is above you while the soul is within you. The psyche is technically more like in your gut, so it's inside you but beneath you. And then the body itself is all the way down to your feet, which is, the most physical, lowest part of you. And they say that, the natural man is an enemy to God in Christianity. That is what they're getting at, is not that, going and living in nature is evil. It's that living out of a mindset that solely takes care of just the body alone, that is a natural carnal man that is becoming an enemy to God, because he is no longer concerned with the psyche or his soul, and therefore he cannot allow the spirit or God to actually enter his life or his endeavors. So moving on to Muslims, we have the jinn, the nafs, the ruh, and the qalb or heart, the fitra or the primordial nature. And again, primordial meaning that which is at the beginning of the cosmos, which was out there unformed in the darkness at the beginning before everything else, that is that divine true aspect of creation. Moving up again into Hinduism, we talked about the Prakriti. They also have Devas and Lokas, the Saguna Brahman, and the Nirguna Brahman. And that is the Prakriti, is the divine energy that you can use throughout your body to interact with the rest of the universe, the divinity of the physical universe. Moving out into the next reality of the Devas and Lokas, which are those those elements in the cosmos that can be manipulated by humanity, that also in turn allow humanity to manipulate nature, cosmos, but also can in turn manipulate humanity by the same virtue. Moving up into the Saguna Brahman, which is, all right, that's where we're moving up into actual divinity, but in a way that still affects the lower cosmos. So divine storms, or causing a storm, for example, like biblically divining, using your sacred powers to make a storm stop, to make a sunny day come in the middle of a rainy one. Saguna Brahman is that realm. And then moving up again into the outermost, the Nirguna Brahman, that's where you're moving into the absolute most divinity, on the furthest most outside, God itself, of your reality. So you would think of that as, well, the math in the universe, or the way the planets swing around, or here's a really good one: the mathematical odds of an asteroid coming through the asteroid belt and knocking Earth and taking us out. That would be in the Nirguna Brahman. So not something that you would daily concern yourself with, except for the fact that if you did happen and you were to suddenly be obliterated into dust, you would need to be considered with the state of your soul and its role in the cosmos, because you're moving through reincarnations, especially if you're believing in Hinduism, you're moving through reincarnations. The planet, the cosmos, on a macrocosmos and a microcosmos level, on every single scale, is moving through incarnation. Therefore, if the world gets exploded, it's because the cosmos, the solar system, needs that to happen for new life to happen somewhere else. Therefore, that was divine action, the same way that God wills it in Muslim, in Islam can still be bad, a bad thing happen, but God wills it, therefore it's divine. And then Nirguna Brahman. Moving up into Buddhism, very similar concept, Nirmanakaya, then Asparas, then Bodhisattvas, and Sambhogakaya. And then above that, we have the Shunyata Nirvana Dharmakaya. So simply, the human level, the Nirmanakaya, the Apsaras is moving up into the divine human level, or that which is directly above human level divinity. So angels, demons, like in Christianity, or you could say gurus are an Apsara, but you would have to be a guru who's basically born as one, born as a divine being, which typically doesn't happen anymore. And yet there are certain places, like I believe it was in Nepal, where they still have certain divine beings that are directed, like that person was incarnated as a divine being, we recognize it by these signs, therefore they treat them like they're a god, a living god. Bodhisattvas and Sambho Gakayas are those who have achieved such a high level that they should have ascended and gone to the next higher plane of godhood, but instead have chosen to come back down to help the rest of us down here on the lowest levels ascend back up, to basically raise the bar of to elevate the bar of ascension. And then Shunyata, Nirvana, and Dharmakaya, those are the absolute beings themselves up there. We're talking about Buddha's actual divine nirvana state, the other gods that inspired Buddha, that also created and then moved up to that, created the cosmos and then moved up to that state. But that's where that is at. Nirvana, if you've ever heard of Buddhism, or that ultimate state that they're all trying to get to, that's why it's in there. Is those beings live in that place, which is a state of absolute bliss, but also absolute oneness, wholeness, magnifyingness. Um, Imagine ideas of when a god has achieved the maximum, not only in what he can achieve, but also in what can be created around that god by his own power. That is nirvana. And a being worthy of that realm, Shunyata Nirvana, Dharmakaya, are the beings who exist in that realm. And then the Chinese religious complex, which the world of 10,000 things is material. The heaven, the earth, or the Shen and the Kuei is the intermediate realm, so above and below, those things that are nature. The Tian, or the speakable Tao, this is heaven, the celestial world, or that which is in the divination realm, that which could come to pass, may not come to pass, which can be influenced, but is typically still in a divine enough realm that the influence can only be minor, because it has to still fall within the realm of what God has intended, or the divine realms have intended. Above that, you have the unspeakable Tao, and there it is, another abstract model of, we don't know exactly if that's a bearded man in the sky, but we do understand that there is a great source order. Something is up there that is the absolute ordering concept or principle, that all other ordering concepts and principles are descending from. In other words, the ultimate power all other powers derive authority from. So, the unspeakable Tao. And in here we have figure 2 complete, the chain, the great chain in various wisdom traditions. Figure 3 is as above, so below. This is more of a, what does this all mean for you in your daily life? Well, this figure pointing up is the levels of reality, pointing down are the levels of selfhood. In the first sphere, you have the terrestrial and the body. So what is concerned with immediately around the earth, what you can grab with your hands and feel with your feet and stand upon and climb upon. That is the terrestrial, what is on earth. People say, get yourself grounded, go touch grass, or hello, down to earth to such and such. That is terrestrial and body, and all the transitive phrases that refer to that. Immediately outside is the mind, or the intermediate. The things that you can mentally concern yourself with, and the things that you can say, hey, if this were to happen, I would do that. If A is plus B equals C, that's all within the mind, or the intermediate realm. You're seeing how figure 2 and all of those religious and psychological concepts and realities all really do fall into these right here. out one more layer, and you have the layer of the soul, the layer of the celestial. And that's what we're starting to concern ourselves with. Is there something after life, life after death? Is there a divine being above me? Is there an infernal being below me? Is there a reason why I'm tempted in certain ways for good or for worse? Is there a reason why I'm guilty when I do bad things? Like all of that is within the celestial or the realm of the soul. The problems and the questions and the concerns of the soul are also the questions and the concerns of the celestial or of the heavens. Finally, we have the spirit. On the furthest, most outermost, you have the spirit and the infinite. Cosmos, God, all of that stuff at the very level, humanity, all of those things that are so big you could scarcely really have an effect on it, but it has a maximum effect on you because that is the outer layer that forms the outer sphere that encapsulates your entire being and the full range of your thought, how far you can reach and grab onto, as well as how far you can realistically see. This is the realm that begins the dream realm, where you begin to abstractly think out there and say, could this one thing I've never thought of happen? And in the dream state, we get to test run that. But then you wake up and it all flushes away like it never happened. And many of us might not even remember we dreamt. That is on the outermost field out there, the infinite and the spiritual. When you come out of a dream, do you say, wow, I have to do exactly what that dream told me today, right now? Well, if you dream like I do, that involves becoming Spider-Man while also having the Venom suit, but also having the Superman power set at the same time, all by just willing and manifesting it. Now, you draw that back into the body and the terrestrial. I know it does not make any kind of sense. I sound like I'm a madman if I'm actually going to go outside and try to make this real. However, if I try to interpret that by the mind and the intermediate, there's some layers there I can extrapolate from, some lessons I can learn. Go out a little bit further to the soul and the concept of the celestial. What does this mean in terms of what I've learned about spirituality and religion? There's a lot more to extrapolate there from my dream. Go out even further to the infinite and the spiritual, and there's almost so much there that you can get lost in talking about it because it's almost entirely the imagination now, and the concepts and the concerns of the imaginary, which does not mean that it's fake and should be disregarded, because the word imaginary means of the images that are ordinary in this reality, the images of reality. Imaginary are the images of your reality. So when you're using your imagination, you're creating a state of reality based on images. You're not technically just bullcrapping, but you are creating something that, if it has no application, then you are wasting the space, the energy, and the time, and everything. But if it does serve a purpose, well, that's the difference between daydreaming and imagining. As above, so below. Whenever you hear that term, instead of thinking, oh, big guy in the sky versus little old me, or worse, devil with horns in the ground underneath me, I want you to instead retool that and start thinking as above means the levels of my reality: terrestrial, intermediate, celestial, and infinite. Level as below, levels of selfhood: body, mind, soul, spirit, and the concepts and philosophies in that. And the great thing is, you can take things like math in school. You can take things like, oh, a philosophy teacher in college said this weird thing. You can be like, oh, my parents make me go to this one church that teaches this thing, and I'm trying to wrap my head around it, and I don't really care. Or you really do care, but you're still trying to wrap your head around it just the same. Start taking all these things and throw them. If you're in a yoga class or you're in martial arts course of some kind, kung fu or karate, same thing. Take everything you're learning and being taught and presented with, and start working them through the chains of being. See where you can categorize and place them all. See how they are, as opposed to when you move into the as above, so below. How do these apply to your body and your terrestrial state, your intermediate world and your mind, your celestial world and your soul, your infinite cosmos, and the concerns of your spirit? How are all of these effectuating and fitting into that? Figure 4, we have a step 1. Matter is not the bottom of all levels, but the exterior of all levels. I love this because here's where we really get to teach and play with matter and concept inversion. So in the innermost level, imagine this. Well, you're going to look at the figure and see the cross chart, a graph even. And at the very middle, we have a sphere called the body. And just like with a lot of these others in the chains of beings, the next sphere is the mind, the next sphere is the soul, the next sphere is the spirit. On the rest of this of the sphere, you have matter at the outermost. Matter in the realm of the spirit. But we just said matter was the realm of the body. Depends on where you're standing. Now imagine this. You're standing at the top of a well. You're looking down the well trying to see the bottom, right? We've all been there looking into a hole before. It's like, okay, yeah, well, there it is. Or you can't see the bottom, it's just a black hole. But either way, you know the concept. Looking down what that's like, seeing the edges like rings getting closer and closer as they go down into the nothing or the bottom. And you've seen depicted in art. Same thing. You just draw circles within each other, within each other, within each other until eventually it starts to look like distance. And then it depends on where you space the lines, where you put the shadows. And that determines if it's going down or up. So imagine you're looking down at the bottom of the well and you see somebody down there looking back up. Now, if you're like me, you get the mental image of somebody is down there, their feet are pointed down. I'm looking down at them from above, therefore, I'm seeing the top of their head. Now, what if you're looking down and instead of that, you're seeing the bottom of their feet? This is concept inversion. That would mean the only way this was possible is if somehow the person at the bottom of that well, looking down at their feet, they're looking at you, looking up at them. Except concept inversion states that this individual would instead be looking down at us as we are in fact looking up at them. Now, I want you to think about that really hard. Let's just disregard gravity for a second here and just think about the concept that just because I'm looking into a hole doesn't mean that the bottom of the hole is technically the bottom of the hole. It could technically be the exit, the top of another hole into another world. Caves, right? If that's the case, and we think about this philosophically, that means that my body, my grounded, my earth, that means that my physical body is me, right? But we're taught in spirituality that no, the energy body is you, the spiritual body is you, the mental body might even be the ego. And we've heard all these arguments. Well, if that's the case, that means each of these layers can be folded in and out of each other. So technically, if spirit is my layer of matter, that would mean that my body in the world of spirit is my spirit itself, the ghost within me, the ghost in the machine. If that's the case, then the ghost in this machine would be looking down into the hole, but he wouldn't be like, I'm looking into a hole. He'd be like, no, I'm looking up through a hole. Because his concept and his philosophies are now from that of the spirit, inverted. As opposed to me, I'm used to in my body, gravity says that when I look into a hole, that's the center of the earth I'm looking down towards. Therefore, that is down, always down. Therefore, when I look up towards the stars, that's out, right? That's up. What if there's a being out there in the stars looking down at me from his sun or from his black hole or from his starship, if you're into aliens? He's looking down at me. I'm looking up at him. But what if he's a being that from a species that evolved with no planet? In which case he wouldn't consider looking down at a planet as somebody on that planet is looking up at him. He would be thinking, I'm looking up at a planet and that planet is looking down at me. I have to climb out of this darkness up into that light. Or maybe that alone is my human concept of that same idea. Now, if that's confusing enough for you, try looking at it from the idea of the mind. What if the mind is your body? Well, we've already kind of played with that just as human beings. When you have trauma happen or you have somebody really make you mad and angry, you start to see and identify everything in the world around you from a specific state of mind. And things stop making sense. And then when people start explaining things to you after you've calmed down, what made sense before doesn't make sense now. What makes sense now makes sense. Things start to get weird, and you start to apply things from the idea of the soul. That's a lot of the new age stuff is from that concept, that reality, that perspective, that we're looking at everything, identifying everything, that cosmos from the idea of the soul. You see a lot of weird concepts and weird terminologies but they still really do connect to spirituality. They connect to psychology. They connect to how people should live physically, because it's an inverted concept from a different state of reality, a different concept of how to live reality, the soul way, the spiritual way, the mind way, or the body way. But in every single way, they're all a type of matter. They're all a form of matter, and matter is informed energy. The cosmos is informed energy, which means everything in reality is nothing but information. Information is always must be interpreted, otherwise the information is meaningless. It's nothing. All of your senses, all they do is interpret that data, that information, into reality. And if you happen to be one of those people where you have a disability or a condition or a mutation that skews or changes or alters or disables any of those, you have a completely different, well, I wouldn't say completely different, you have an altered concept of reality that may even benefit your being in a way that another would just miss. We've recently found that color blindness in men changes the way that men emotionally interact with the world. But in women, oh, this one's cool. In women, it changes literally the things that they notice. Women who have color blindness, they don't, it's not that they don't see the same colors as we do. They do. They just see more. And so I have a colorblind person that I've spent many years of my life with, who she doesn't see certain colors like I do. And we have fun, playful arguments all the time about that's not red or that's not blue or that's not orange. And every time I'm just like, wait, you're colorblind. What are you seeing right now? And she'll describe the color. I'm like, the only way you could see that color is if you're colorblind right now, because I'm seeing something that's orange. And she's like, or she's saying it's orange. No, she's saying it's brown and I'm saying it's orange. But then she'll see things that I'm like, what are you talking about? That's just fuchsia. And she's like, no, that's not fuchsia. It's like plum, or it's like some other shade of purple that she can barely describe to me. And I'm just like, what science used to tell us is, oh, she's clearly blind. But she's not seeing gray. What she's seeing is something that she's trying to describe to me in words that were given to her that do not match that thing. It could be brownish purple, is what she's telling me. And I'm just like, that's orange. But maybe it's because she, in her color blindness, is actually seeing a color that hasn't been identified by our culture yet. When they take colorblind testing results and testing, and they take them to African tribes or Amazonian tribes and Pacific Islander tribes, they get wicked results where all these tribes see all kinds of colors that they can barely put on the books, and other colors that they don't even have on the books, artist books, and yet they'll be like, I can't see this color, I can't see it, and they'll take normal colors that we teach in elementary school in the United States, and they won't be able to see those colors. They'll just see random shades of browns and grays and other colors, but they won't see the ones that are being described by the professional, which goes to show you that everyone's reality is truly relative, not just because I might be crazy or you might be crazy, but in terms of our genetic makeup has determined that my gene sequence in this cosmos is literally meant to perceive it a specific way so that I can interact with that information, compute and create and alter the cosmos in another specific way that only I am capable of with my perception and my genetic makeup. With these eyes to see, only I can see the way I see and interpret what I see the way I interpret them. Same is true for you. And therefore, your experience becomes invaluable in this reality. And then your expression of that experience is also invaluable. And you can express things with your mind, you can express things with your soul, with your spirit, or you can express things with your body. You can do it violently or peacefully. You can do it inspirationally. You can do it dejectively. I mean, people who make demotivational posters and post them online as memes, they're serving, they're serving something. It's probably just the greater humor circuit in within human civilization, but that greater human circuit is an archetype in our reality. It's a wavelength of humor energy that runs through every human soul that makes up a part of who we are. It is the joy in the human being. And if men are that mean we might have joy, then it seems like we kind of need the fools, don't we? I mean, yes. Unfortunately, at times, yes, we need them. Thank you if you're a fool. Thank you. Thank you for your service. Now, moving on to figure number 4. We have probably the most complex one is the 4 quadrants. Looks complex, it's really not. It's basically the way that your body works, the way that the world works, the way that society works, and the way that matter in science works in scale. and how the scales connect. So at scale 1, atoms, galaxies, the physical, and the prehension. So the I is the intentional, the upper left interior individual, or the intentional. That is level 1, prehension. The upper right's exterior individual, or the behavioral, the IT, is the atoms. And the lower right, the exterior collective or the social corner, is the ITS. And the lower left is the interior collective cultural. The ITS corner was galaxies, and the lower left interior collective cultural corner was the physical. So if we move outward, atoms, galaxies, physical, and prehension. Prehension is you're sensing something before it's happening, or you're thinking about, oh, this is going to happen before it happens. You're noticing. Immediately outside of that, we have molecules, planets. So in scale, one down, one up from atoms as molecules, one down from galaxies as planets. And then you have the pleromatic over here in the cultural, which is humans group interpretations and implementations of things. And then you have a half step from the prehension into the irritability. Interesting that. Irritability is when something piques you in a way that you must act. You cannot be passive. You have to act. That's irritability. You cannot just remain irritable. You have to go irritable. You have to act now. Something is causing you to act. Moving outside of that, we have the prokaryotes, the Gaia system, the protoplasmic, and full irritability. Outside of that, we have eukaryotes, the at number 4, and then the heterotrophic ecosystems, and then you have the vegetative, and a half step from irritability into sensation. Are these starting to make sense now? Even if the words are weird, I just want you to kind of just absorb them and start thinking about them, because we're going to go through a few definitions here. Number 5 is the neuronal organisms, the things that can now start to think and react on a conscious level, right? Or things connected to consciousness. So your neurons and the way the neurons start reacting to things in your body is one step shy of you subconsciously reacting to things. It's very still physical cause and effect. Moving on that, we have societies with division of labor. Interesting. One step shy of cause and effect is the organization of those things. Moving over to the locomotive. Oh, so now the body is beginning to actually have repeated action. So locomotion is an automation in the body. So heartbeats, breathing, things like that, the subtle twitches. Moving from there into the next, the intentional is your full-on sensations. I can sense that that thing is happening. I can feel my heart rate. I can feel my breath. I can taste the air. I can smell. I can tell that I am thinking thoughts, which takes us into the next level, which is the neural cord, the transmission of these informations, down to number 6, which is the societies with the division of labor, but their implementation. So a half step towards groups and families. Then you have the half step from locomotive to uroboric. And then from there, you have perception. I am perceiving things are happening. I am identifying that there is data that there is a data and equation happening. Outside of that is number 7, reptilian brain system. Groups and families. This is where you have herds, and where you could say evolution began to group us into packs and herds. The uroboric, full on into the uroboric, which is we are now forming a way of being as a group. This is how we are. This is, in my case, the greater Lee family clan that has moved across the generations of the United States is the uroboric. We have a specific, those are the Lees, and the Lees move around, I guess. It's a good way to start that. Up into number 7 up top is impulse. Now consciously, intentionally, there was an impulse to move, not just, oh, I'm reacting to the magnetic waves of the sphere. That would have been sensation. This is the impulse to do so. 8, Limbic system, the limbic system in the body. All right, now we're starting to actually pump juices around and chemicals and starting to create motion and energy on a level that requires that is the outcome of the requirement of exertion. Now we have a half step from groups and families into tribes. So the families are getting big enough that they're beginning to interact with each other and spread out, which is forming group dynamic, intergroup dynamics in politics, you could say. The beginnings of them. We're moving into the typhonic, where again, starting to see cultural, but also goods and bads, and possibly even friction zones and kinds of cultures. Little outliers are starting to form that don't jive as well with the insiders. And then the emotional. That is why, is because intentionally people are now beginning to act on their emotions. They're beginning to have intentions based on their emotions. 9 is the neocortex or the triune brain. The neocortex is where the part of the three different sections of the brain truly connect and begin to interact with each other. The neocortex is where actual consciousness, subconsciousness begins to form and act, or we can read it on a dial and you can start to say that is human actual being human now, is they're beginning to act like it, whether they know it or not. They're beginning to do certain things. Now we have tribes, but alongside tribes, you also have foraging, where we're gathering food for the group, not for the self, and to store, not for the immediate consumption. And we're doing it in caring and in kindness and in compensation of the groups in the tribes, not just the one family who's only taking care of their kids and their spouse and their father, and that's it. This is all of the families, all the groups interacting together to form tribes that are beginning to stay in one place and actually densify, which is why the foraging moves. We have over into the cultural again. We have the archaic. They're beginning to actually carve things in. They're beginning to put down roots. They're beginning to actually say, okay, we are the people of this land. Symbols begin to form. Symbols are before spirituals and religions and cults and all that stuff. Is first you have symbols. Symbols like, because of the stars are specifically interacting with the sun on the sunrise on this season at this place, we have a specific circle with a line moving through it start to form as a symbol of this is when we need to begin to farm and prepare to farm, as opposed to a different symbol that is interpreted as, okay, this is when we need to begin to cut everything, burn the fields, put away and store all of the food and get ready for the winter. Symbols begin to form. Symbols for, okay, when a man hits this age, certain things need to happen or else he's going to go weird. Or when a woman hits this certain age, certain things need to happen or she's going to go weird. And all of these ideas of precepts to tradition begin to form here. If we do these things this way. Now we have, moving up into layer 10, is the complex neocortex. That is where we are now thinking and saying, hey, you, I think this way, I think therefore I am. Who are you? What are you doing? Who do you think you are? And all that other stuff, culture, interaction. You see tribes and villages begin to actually expand into communities that are now different from each other, but still coexisting. Horticulture begins to form where they're laying out whole fields for mass farming. And from here, the magic starts to take form, where if I do these mystical things, those mystical outcomes happen, whether it's disease, whether it's healing, whether it's these plants or these pests controls. Magic is being implemented now. From magic, we also have concepts, actual concept of, because we are this way in this land, the land has turned out differently than when we got here. Therefore, there is a concept of, I think we did something permanent to change the land. That's a concept. The idea that, families that stay together, parents that stay together, the families survive all kinds of things and form more families. Parents that split, the families annihilate. The individuals that come up from those families have a chance of self-annihilating and then spreading the annihilation to other groups and other family circles. These concepts, whether they're right or wrong, are beginning to be noticed, and you'll start to find even the most primitive tribes right now that are still functional in Africa, Polynesia, around the world, the Amazons, you'll find that they still have small systems that we would say that's weird, but then on closer inspection, you see they're correcting certain fatherlessnesses and other problems that our modern society can't do anything about, and yet they've already found this weird little quirk that does fix it 100% of the time. Maybe we should learn from that. You also have SF1, SF2, SF3. This is where we're moving from beyond the standard human into the um, SF does not sound for sci-fi, but we're moving into the post standard civilization human, moving into what could be the superhuman. Its correspondences are we end up with agrarian, industrial, and informational systems. We end up with early states and empires, nation states and empires, and planetary communities, planetary politics, planetary economics, planetary politics. We move over from the mythic into the rational and the centauric. We move up, which is we're combining systems and to create new systems like medicine, computations, and high maths and all that other stuff that involves things like stars and concepts that are supposed to be beyond us, but we're using our mythic and our rational together to create the centauric. And then we end up with rules, former rules, or sorry, we end up with rules, laws, and then the idea of vision and logic, where we all have a combined vision or a different vision, or we all have logic that we move through, or we can all understand what illogic is, and logic that doesn't make sense is illogical, which is unethical typically and therefore immoral. And we see that these go from concepts to rules to laws to ways of being. This is just how we are. You can hear that all the time, how people say this is how Americans are, well, this is how Russians are, this is how you name it, Japanese, whatever. This is how these kinds of people are. Or on the one hand, it's prejudice, possibly even racist. The enlightened side says no, it's because these people tend to have a unifying vision or a way of thinking that is just their own. In Japan, it would be something similar to the concept of Nippon, where it is a Japanese person when you meet them and talk to them because they just have certain ways of thinking, certain ways of being, certain belief systems that are just ever present across all Japanese people. You line them to a Chinese person, there's a lot of similar there, but then there's other things that are very Chinese specific. This is how Chinese people are, how Chinese people do things, and just how they think, how they feel, and how they interpret the world around them. Because it it's as cultural as it is evolutionary, as it is symbolic, as it is all of these. They evolved into that thing, that being, just as you did. And this is how you can really break it down and understand, oh, this is how people formed. This is how you formed. All the way down to the atom, all the way out to the complex neocortex. All from your prehension all the way to your vision and logic, from the physical and the plurimatic, from the idea of stardust in the galaxies, all the way out to your planetary system, your nation state, your politics, how you rationalize and how you crunch ideas of magic, ideas of astrology, ideas of science and rationalism into one belief system that allows you to actually succeed in this world. Finally, we have figure 6. The final aspect of the chain of being is aspects of the four quadrants as they appear in humans. So really quickly, we have self and consciousness on the left, brain and organism on the right, social system and environment on the bottom, and culture and worldview on the bottom left, just like we had before. Layer 1 is the impulsive self or sensations, the organic, and the survival clans in the archaic. So we can see civilization started there, but we can also see people start there, children start there. We empower the self, we gain states of self, we get states and communities, you get horticulture, you get people are actually trying to live long term in one space, they're planting roots. You get the magic system start to form, and because the way that we interact with the world around us, the way the world around us interacts with us now matters, and we're building systems to implement that. We go up to the conformist self and we have rules and we have, oh, our society needs these rules and I need to have these rules or else I'll go crazy. The limbic system starts to take effect. And then in the body, you have agrarian systems where, okay, we need to start systemizing everybody's ability to eat and feed and shelter and survive. And that's where the mythic starts. We're building monuments and temples and government centers. Going out from the conformist, you have the achiever self. And from the achiever self, you have those powerful systems start to form. The In the body, you start to build things and start to do things. You start to in evolution, this was making clothes and building structures and houses and buildings. You move on to feudal empires, you move on to corporate states, you have jobs, you have side hustles and ways of partnering with friends and family to accomplish other tasks. The rational and the pluralistic lead into the sensitive self and the authentic self, which is post formal laws and societal functions and the vision, the logic again. The neocortex and the complex cortex form, and then suddenly the informational, the industrial, and the planetary societies start to form. Suddenly, you as a person become modern, you become connected, you start to utilize technology, you start to walk around and talk like you know things, you start to give advice to people because you've experienced things, and we're into what's called the transpersonal level now, which is a third tier human being, possibly even to be considered post-human, because by the time you have the majority of humanity hitting this point of transpersonal level, you'll see people starting to decide between, do I need cybernetic implants? Will this cell theory practice lead to a stem cell treatment that allows me to stop aging and live forever? Transpersonal technology, society, people, psychology, all have to reach these same levels, or else nothing can happen. You can give high age, modern, even futuristic medicine to the people of the dark ages, and I guarantee you they will end up with the same Black Death anyway, the same big Black Plague anyway, because they didn't have all of the other evolutionary systems and all the other parts of their being or their societies in place to handle that knowledge. You might end up with something worse. It's just like, that's why you don't give gunpowder to tribals, because they take the guns and they murder all of their rivals, and they take all of the land, and they can't manage the land because there isn't enough of them. They didn't learn about all the different variations in climate and animal migration cycles, and they end up wrecking some things and doing worse than the original tribe of the area that evolved there managed and lived, because there were just some things they didn't know. You see that right now. America occupies Iraq, tries to set up a Western Democratic State in Iraq, tries to let them have their elections, watches two civil wars and the Islamic State rise, and now it's basically a dummy state for Iran. What happened? Well, it's because in no part of any of Earth history that we know of did the Iraqi people or their ancestors have a fully Western democratic system with gun rights laws and an electoral representative democracy, or a republic. They've never had any of those. The most they've ever had is theocratic rule or strongman dictator rule. And in both cases, you have a centralized authority that's making the rules for everybody at the point of a gun or a sword. That's what they know. You're not going to succeed giving somebody something, anything else, unless they have experienced what it took to evolve and develop inside themselves what it took to be like you. Same reason why I can't take some random schmo off the street or some random millionaire off the street and give him all my problems and expect him to solve them all. You can't. Because on the one hand, they won't have the experience to solve all of them. On the other hand, they won't have the heart to solve all of them. And even if they did, and they quote unquote solved all of my financial problems, they would have done things that I didn't have the heart to do and may not even be able to live with myself having done. That's what we're looking at here. In the Middle East, you have to kill a lot of people to stay in power in those systems with those cultures. But if you were to just pull one thing out, like their religion, and put something else in there, everything would fall apart, and you get it with war and blood. You, they have to evolve of themselves just like we do. It'd be like taking off my leg and then saying, all right, now that I've removed your right leg, let's figure out how to make you play basketball. I've got prosthetics. Yeah, we can do that. But wouldn't it have been better just to have me use my original leg to learn basketball instead of having to learn how to use a prosthetic and then play basketball with a prosthetic? Like, I don't care how good your prosthetic is or your cyborg technology. That's counterintuitive. Even in the TV shows where you have guys with cybernetic limbs doing boxing and stuff, they learned to box before they learned to before they put the robot arm on. And otherwise, what the heck were they doing? You learn to ride a bike with training wheels. Otherwise, it's a lot of asphalt you're eating. So I hope that you take these chains of being, really work them through your head, really work your emotions, really work your concepts and your ideas of how the world works, what you've been taught, and work them through these. Something that I love to repeat in my own head that I wish everybody heard this, and please spread this too. If all you know in your life is what you've been told, you don't know anything at all. All I know and all I am telling you about are things that I have lived and experienced myself. And I would hope that you do the same and you go through your life doing the same. Only preach what you practice, only talk about what you're literally doing, only teach about what you've literally experienced and lived through. That is how we remain authentic. That is how you can tell the difference between somebody who is what they tell you they are versus someone who's either a machine or just trying to get some money or some power out of you. All in all, I bless you. I hope you live enlightened.